Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the People's School for Marxist-Leninist Studies. Today is April 22nd, 2025, the birthday anniversary of Comrade Vladimir Lenin. And tonight's class, though, will not be on him, but on the pamphlet of Industrial Unionism by William Z. Foster. This was a very influential pamphlet, and in fact, this was one of the pamphlets that were used to organize the Amazon Labor Union and the warehouses out in New York. A few reminders before we begin. The People's School for Marxist-Leninist Studies is a party of communist initiated and sponsored school. This does allow us to have a wide variety of topics, but it is not a party school. So there will be perhaps some things that are different from party line, but it does allow us a wide range of topics for discussion. As well, during the question and answer sessions, if you have a question or would like to comment, please use the raise hand function and please make sure your video is on. If we cannot see your face, we unfortunately will not unmute you, but do feel free to pass your comment along to one of the co-hosts and we will ask it and answer it for you. All right. So today we're going to break down this into four sections just because the third section got a tad bit long. So we'll be talking about early industrial unionism and the struggle against craft unions as a bit of a history. Then we'll go over craft unionism and industrial unionism and the role of communists, structure of the industrial unionism part one, and then a part two along with trade union unity and the People's Front and the lessons that they apply to today. So our first section will be on an early industrial unionism and the struggle against craft unionism. Comrade, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Towards unity of the workers in each given industry. Excerpted from William Z. Foster's Industrial Unionism, which is available from New Outlook Publishers. They tell the story of a sparrow who fell out of a tree, and while falling, lightly brushed against the tail of an elephant. "Oh, excuse me, sir," the sparrow apologized. "Did I hurt you?" That covers the situation of the weak, powerless craft union up against a powerful group of industrial and financial barons in control of any important American industry today. This old yarn is all the more apt when you look at a typical craft union head and his painful eagerness to avoid offending any big employer. They have left the American workers divided and wide open to any attacks the employers have chosen to make, and the employers have grabbed every advantage that the policies of the AFL Executive Council have given them. Because the result of such policies is so plain to the American working class, there has been a great seething going on in the ranks of the American Federation of Labor, affecting a growing section of the AFL leadership too. A struggle of the greatest importance to the whole American working class is taking place inside the AFL around the issues of industrial unionism. The struggle for industrial unionism reached a sharp point at the 1935 AFL convention in Atlantic City, under the leadership of the John L. Lewis Bloc, which later formed the Committee for Industrial Organization. The Communist Party supports that struggle, as it has always supported all progressive struggles, aiming at the unity of the working class and the organization of the unorganized. The membership of the AFL and the 2 million who want to be organized into the AFL realize that three things: industrial unionism, meaning the unity of the workers in each given industry; a policy of fighting against the bosses, class struggle, instead of smoking cigars with them over the conference table, class collaboration; and third, trade union democracy, can go together to make the powerful kind of organization that could stop the bosses, so strongly united as they are, from taking it out of the hides of the workers through wage cuts,
can go together to make the powerful kind of organization that could stop the bosses, and strongly united as they are, from taking it out of the hides of the workers through the wage cuts, increasing speed ups, firings, and blacklisting workers for joining a union. The demand is rising more and more for unity, and steps towards industrial unionism in the shape of a closely knit federation, the commencing and expiring of agreements of all crafts and industries on the same date, or in the shape of amalgamation between the few trades, or in a general scale given industries. When trade unionism was young, there were no industries as we now know them today. Shops were small and far between. Each shop employed one kind of tradesman only. Blacksmiths worked only at blacksmith shops, and only blacksmiths worked there. Molders worked only in molding shops, and so on. The craft unions served the real purpose. The craft unions in those days were able to cope with the employers, who were for the most part small shop owners. Gradually, the employers piled up more and more wealth and combined their capital and factories into larger industrial units. Employers also began to form employers' associations, great unions of capitalists to control output and prices, to fix wages, that is, to cut them jointly, to fix the trade unions, to establish an industry-wide blacklist and spy system against workers who joined unions or those who tried to organize unions. There were more than a dozen metal craft unions in the AFL back in the days when shops were small and trust undreamed of. They're the same number today, even though lined up against the workers in the metal industries, there's a powerful National Metal Trades Association and still more powerful iron and steel industries. They like a bunch of Britchbard Canos against a super dreadnought, the worst of it, that they usually sent up against the dreadnought, one canoe at a time. The easy to see how would it be possible to fight the employers in such an industry by pitting one craft union today, another one some other time, and so on down the line against a man with the power of Henry Ford. There are other strong reasons which show that craft unionism no longer fills the bill and must give way to industrial unionism. Machinery and supermachinery in modern industry have largely done away with skill. This is not only true of the mass production industry, as well as shall soon see, it has become more and more true even in industries where their craft unions have always dominated, which seems to be a very stronghold of the skilled craftsman. Imagine trying to organize and win better conditions in such an industry on the basis of anywhere from a dozen to a dozen different craft unions, each with different initiation fees, different dues, and different headquarters, agreements expiring at different dates, different sets of officials, each trying to advance their own cause at the expense of the others, making raids on one another's membership to come to work. Workers are forced by such conditions as above, imposed by such powerful interests as mentioned above with craft unions, is to call a spade, not to want to organize these workers at all. Instead of having led struggles in their own trades, the big shots in the craft unions tried to break the backs of the new industrial unions in the mass production industries by making grabs for their members and splitting them up. They are like hungry boarders scrabbling for the eats with their forks, but instead upsetting the whole platter and the greed on that nobody anything against the policy of splitting, of tearing apart the ranks of the AFL and working class in general. The slogan for a united AFL must be raised, a slogan which the Communist Party backs and effectively fights for. For a united AFL on a basis of one shop, one industry, one union, plus a fighting policy to gain the demands of the workers and real trade union democracy within the AFL is the direct result of craft ideas, and that craft union leaders consistently take advantage of the position of each other's unions and unskilled by making a bargain for their own craft union at the expense of the rest. Such scabbery is the direct result of craft unionism, under which the various unions in the shops have agreements with the same employer, but expiring at different dates. So that is one craft strike, the others cannot, on the excuse that they are bound to the job by their agreements. Scabbery of this sort, of the craft unions against craft union, has happened innumerable times on building trade jobs. No wonder on one building job there may be maybe as many as 20 different agreements with 20 different business agents. In recent years, the craft unions have eased calling strikes altogether, except jurisdictional strikes, in which a craft union calls a strike not against the boss, but against another craft union. These are disputes in which the craft unions battle each other, in some cases, in order to steal jobs away from each other, or in the case of the steel members, from each other. The building trade craft union leaders saw the jurisdictional disputes not only preventing the organization of the majority of the building workers, but also bringing about the loss of members already in their unions. Still, they weren't interested in putting a stop to these fatal putting a stop to these inter-union fights by means of closely knit federations, leading a amalgamation of the unions and the building trades union, through which they could get down to the real business of organizing the hundreds of thousands of unorganized builders, trade workers. So the same warfare between the builders' unions goes on today. Scabbing by unions against unions and strikes, the calling of strikes against other unions, instead of against the employers and for the improvement of the wages and conditions. A mad scramble for jurisdiction over jobs for which shall control a handful of members instead of going out and organizing the many millions still unorganized. There are the miserable results of craft unionism and division of the workers. Craft unionism has not only resulted in splitting the ranks of the workers generally, but the top leaders of the craft unions have been the leaders in splitting the ranks of the workers. As been white and Negro workers, it is in the craft unions especially that the Negro workers have met with a color bar. Many of the craft union leaders have actively fostered and practiced of preventing the Negro workers from obtaining skilled positions in their apprenticeships. Systems, young Negroes have strictly been barred, closing up the avenues leading towards the holding of skilled jobs. Not constant with barring Negroes from membership in many unions, the craft union leadership have made little or no attempts to organize the Negro workers generally. Craft unionism has also left a huge majority, millions of young men and women workers in the lurch. Without trade unionism protection, women and young workers do not work in large numbers in the strong crafts and trades what the AFL Council considers its backbone. And little or no attempt has been made to organize those industries where large numbers of young workers and women work. In those cases with large numbers of young workers and women have been organized. It has been done by unions, industrial or semi-industrial in form. The present great and ever-growing demand within the AFL for industrial unionism is not the first such demand. As far back as 1903, reactionary old Sam Gompers himself said that scarcely an affiliated organization is not engaged in the desperate fight with one or more other unions, and that unless they change their course, the unions would destroy one another. Trade union members who had sacrificed and were willing to sacrifice considerably more for their unions began to press hard for change in the structure of the AFL, away from a hidebound craft lines on the basis of plant and industrial unions.
Thank you, Comrade. And with that, we'll stop for a round of discussion and questions. Please use the raise hand function if you have a question or a comment. Comrade Andrea, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's mentioned later, but what, in one or two sentences, what is the difference between a craft union and a industrial union? Thank you.
So we'll actually go into that a little more in the future sections, but you want to respond?
I'll just give a quick short answer. Craft union is a union based off a particular craft, plumbers, electricians, based off the old guild system. An industrial union, to put it plainly, is one industry one union that represents the whole industry.
Well spoken.
Does that mean like everyone in the work site is belong to the same union?
Yeah.
Scott.
Yes, but ideally all of the same. Like if a company has 5 different locations, it will be all one union. Different locals maybe, but all one union.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I think an example of that might be the carpenters. They're not in principle an industrial union, but because of the evolution of things like planing, they've had to extend their membership to factory planers or people who are involved with um, like factory framing and stuff like that in the plants. In addition to like organizing on-site carpentry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I suddenly realized that even in the beginning, there was always even competition among unions, and that they didn't hold all the unions in respect, so to speak. I find that, one, interesting, and two, it's like, oh, it's just the same problems we have now, that there's always been this case. And I find that interesting that they don't respect each other, that they don't understand that they need to unify and not work against each other. So I find it fascinating that, since the dawn of unions, we still have that problem.
Thank you, comrade.
Yeah, yes. Originally, I wanted to respond to the carpenters are not an industrial union; they are a craft union. Uh, Historically, in many factories, there were craft unions. The factories were split in between multiple craft unions, and that was an issue that was faced. I mean, we could go back through all labor struggles for industrial unions isn't to find that. But in response to that is the typical backwards thinking of craft unions. They're only out for their craft and they protect their craft and their craft only. And there's a lot of issues with regards to crafts. A lot of these fights, and historically where they would scab on each other, had to do with jurisdiction and crafts trying to take over jurisdiction of other crafts. And it's an issue that hasn't changed in the labor movement. Thankfully, it's not as bad as it used to be because of the prevalence of industrial unionism. But it's a long, sordid history with regards to that stuff.
Thank you, comrade. Comrade, you haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying a couple things. I know that historically craft unions tended to be more reactionary, and this holds on true even to the current day. And I was just wondering why. And another thing about the scabbing on each other, I know from experience these are both industrial unions. The UFCW has an informal agreement with the Teamsters, which the Teamsters will go and scab if there isn't one person from the UFCW there. And some organizers I've talked to have said that sometimes it'd be just one person just sleeping outside the location, so the Teamsters wouldn't go in. So that still happens.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask and this is more of an observation, less of a question, but if anybody has any more information, do tell. Why does it seem like with Starbucks or even Amazon, when a place unionizes, it's only that place that unionizes? Like it was said earlier, how one union for one trade. Why hasn't all of Amazon unionized? Why do unions only happen locally? Thank you.
Would you like to respond?
Yes. Unions do not only happen locally, but it takes a concerted, long-term, mass national campaign to get all locations organized. You could look at historical struggles, like we had the two classes in January on the Flint sit-down strike. It was just the locations in Flint that won that representation at that time, but it was a campaign nationwide, and eventually all GM locations were unionized. It takes time, it takes building. You have to hold the same fights in every location in order to get it, in order to get representation. It's not something that just happens if one location gets it. It's a long struggle. And a lot of it has to do with the way labor laws are set up. Because in some cases, you can just have, this mainly happens when companies or bosses voluntarily recognize unions, that voluntarily recognize them all over the place. But it's rare.
Thank you, Comrade.
I was not declaring that the carpenters union was an industrial union. I just thought that was an interesting observation, because initially they were against it. I think a very good example of actually we were talking about was the UAW. I believe they started out as like a federal, like under the AFL directly.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to our second section now. And actually, there was a typo in the introduction slide. The second section should be called the foreshadowing campaign for the CIO. So, Comrade, you said you were able to read. Can I have you have the floor, sir? Get you there.
Okay. Foreshadowing to the campaign for the CIO. After 40 years of intensive educational work by the progressive and revolutionary elements in the trade union movement on the necessity for industrial unionism to organize the workers in the mass production industries of the country, at last it is being applied on a general scale by the Committee for Industrial Organization, headed by John L. Lewis. The effectiveness of this type of unionism is being borne out in practice by the unparalleled growth of the CIO unions in steel, auto, rubber, oil, radio, shipbuilding, textile, transport, and other industries. Real strides are finally being made toward the organization of the great mass of workers in the basic industries. The growth of these industrial unions naturally is accompanied by a whole series of new problems, not only with regard to unionizing tactics and strike strategy, but also concerning organizational forms and the methods of conducting the union's activities generally. In the past, there have been a few American trade unions formed on an industrial basis, notably the United Mine Workers of America, United Textile Workers, Paper Workers, Brewery Workers, and, at least on paper, Butcher Workmen. Metal miners and iron, steel, and tin workers, as well as the 4 semi-industrial needle trade unions. But the new CIO unions are coming into existence under conditions that raise many problems not previously solved by these forerunners of present-day industrial unionism. It is the purpose of this pamphlet to answer the most urgent of these questions on the basis of broad experience by many unions in the United States and other countries. In considering the organizing problems of the new industrial unions, it is necessary always to bear in mind the decisive fact that labor unions are organs of struggle. Unions sign trade agreements with the bosses and carry them out loyally, but behind these agreements, a relationship of power always exists. Thus, labor unions are able to secure concessions from the employers in direct ratio to their strength. Hence, all organizational forms and practices in the industrial unions must be developed with regard to increasing the fighting power of these bodies. The basic improvement of the CIO industrial unions over the AFL craft organizations is that they are more effective organs of struggle against capitalist exploitation. First, instead of splitting the workers of an industry, as the AFL does, into from 10 to 25 separate craft unions, all of which are autonomous, pulling this way and that, and consequently quite incapable of bringing a solid pressure to bear against the employers. The CIO unites all the workers of a given industry into one broad industrial union, thereby enormously increasing the workers' strength. Second, instead of being dominated by arbitrary bureaucracies, such as rule practically every AFL craft union, and thereby paralyze the effectiveness of those organizations, the new industrial unions of the CIO, despite some undemocratic hangovers from the past, are developing a new trade union democracy, a real improvement which greatly increases their potentialities in the struggle against the employers. Behind the basic organizational differences between the AFL and CIO unions stand two fundamentally divergent conceptions of unionism. On the one hand, the AFL craft unionism characteristically does not consider or organize the workers as a class or recognize the existence of the class struggle. Instead, it caters principally to the more skilled elements, and it does not hesitate to sacrifice the welfare of the broad masses of the semi-skilled and unskilled in order to further the interest of the skilled workers. Upon this general outlook is based the whole policy of the AFL, its wheedling attitude towards the employers, its subservient policy of class collaboration, its failure to organize the unorganized, its craft scabbery during strikes, its tailing after the capitalist political parties and begging them for minor concessions, etc. The general results of such a narrow craft policy we see in the AFL's repeated loss of strikes, its inability to organize the mass production industries, the insignificant percentage of workers, even of the skilled, that it has organized, and the weak position politically of the workers in American life. On the other hand, the CIO organizes the workers primarily as a class. Although the CIO leadership does not accept the class struggle in theory, the CIO's very birth, its broad unions, and its strong organizing campaigns and strikes testify eloquently enough to the reality of the class struggle. The basis of the CIO's industrial unionism is a militant defense of the interests not only of the privileged few skilled workers, but of the great masses of unskilled and semi-skilled as well. With this broader conception and policy of unionism, therefore, it is not to be wondered at that the rise of the CIO unions has been marked by the winning on many strikes against the great trust, a tremendous strengthening of the trade union movement in the mass production industries, and the beginning of a broad political movement of the toilers that is heading in the direction of a farmer labor party. The AFL stands for craft unionism, the CIO for class unionism. The growth of the CIO implies the consolidation of the American proletariat for the first time as a class. It is a well-known fact that the political content of an organization's program expresses itself also in the whole structure and organizational practices of that body. In accordance with this principle, the AFL, during its half century of existence, has built up a whole series of organizational forms and methods corresponding to and flowing out of its basic policy of craft unionism. It is fundamentally necessary that the new CIO industrial unions also adapt all their organic structures and methods of conducting business to fit in with their class conception of unionism.
Thank you, Comrade Kim. With that, we'll stop for another round of discussion and comments. Comrade Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah, so what does AFL stand for and what does CIO stand for? Thank you.
So the AFL is the American Federation of Labor, and the CIO in this instance is not the Congress of Industrial Organizations, but the Committee for Industrial Organizations. Did you want to respond as well?
Yeah, that's you got it. The American Federation of Labor was at this time was the old Federation of Labor that was dominated and controlled by the craft unions. And at this time, as the Committee for Industrial Organization, which would later go on to become the Congress of Industrial Organizations, this was the attempt of the leaders of mainly the United Mine Workers and the International Lady Garment Workers Union and a couple of other unions to organize industrial unions in the framework of the American Federation of Labor, but it faced a lot of pushback, and eventually all the CIO unions were expelled. But for more on this, go check out the YouTube page for Labor United Educational League and watch the series on the history of the CIO. And I believe we have one more volume of the history of the CIO this year, and it's going to be a long, ongoing series, and we're going to get into all these details there. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade. Yeah, and for this section, as it was being read, I was rather struck that how some of the old AFL practices can kind of mirror today, and the organizing of the CIO also mirrors tasks that are to be done to build class consciousness. Comrade Angelo, you have the floor. You haven't spoken tonight.
Yeah. When I started teaching, we had a union. It was called the United Federation of Teachers, Local 2 of the American Federation of Teachers. And as we were going through this class tonight, I was saying, where do we fit in? And then I realized the American Federation of Teachers came out of the AFL. They did not come out of the CIO, number one. Number two, they are definitely skilled workers. In order to become a teacher, you have to get a skill. You cannot just come off the street and learn how to do a machine, and after a while you do no. You have to be a skilled, like a person who's a dentist. In fact, what they tend to do, teachers call their job a profession. Professionals, like doctors, lawyers, and dentists. They tend to want to see themselves as professionals, not as school workers, which is what they are. And so you can understand why the mentality of a teacher is not of the work of joining workers. Very elitist. They're very elitist. They're very individualist. Most teachers tend to be that way. It's amazing. And even in our rank and file movement, where you have left-wing progressive individuals, we have the same problem. We have individualism. Some think they know more than the collective. It definitely comes out of the whole idea of teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Angelo. Comrade, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, what was the name of your union again, Dr. Angelo?
It was called United Federation of Teachers.
Okay.
By the way, that wasn't the original union. The original union in New York was called the New York Teachers Union. Started in 1916. In 1936, the socialists were thrown out and the communists took over the union. Ever since then, the United States government hated them. And during the McCarthy period, the leaders of the New York Teachers Union were sent to prison. Okay. And they didn't play ball with the government the way the socialists did in the trade union movement. So what happened there was a union vote for collective bargaining rights, representation, and the Social Democrats won that in 1960, I think it was 62. Okay. And they have been in control of the union, the Shanker people, the Social Democrats of the Teachers Union of New York for 90 years. Thank you.
I'd love to see I'd love you to do a history of the New York Teachers Union one of these days, Comrade Angelo.
I would love to.
Yeah, what local 2?
Local 2 of the American Federation of Teachers.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to second what Angela was saying as far as that professional thing. That's very true in healthcare as well. Like, for example, our nurses union, instead of just fighting for basic higher wages, they fought to do a clinical ladder. So if nurses go through this thing where they do peer-reviewed stuff off the clock, they might get a $3,000 bonus at the end of it. Like, that's what our union fought for, because they like to gatekeep their profession very much.
I'm sorry, you pay me. No, I don't do things off the clock. No. All right.
Tell me if this detracts from the class at all, but in my state, we currently have on the table SB 387, which basically will allow for like schools to hire teachers without license. And I assume this is done to accommodate the growing industry of charter schools, which they by making it easier for them to just hire bums off the street, essentially. Like, pay them less.
I think the question's a little outside the class tonight, but I'm gonna assume it's for hiring people without qualifications so you can pay them less. I saw hands go up.
I was just going to respond to, I've been working as a substitute teacher. So this might be outside the purview, but basically right now there's a massive teacher shortage, mostly because they don't pay teachers enough. So there are already several measures in place to try and attract more teachers. There's emergency teaching licenses, where if you just have a bachelor's degree, you can teach for a year and that's it. There are other programs where you can say that you're working on your teacher's license while you're already working as a teacher. But yeah, I feel like the move to have a license not be a requirement could be, said that it's to fill the teacher shortage, but really, like, it's just so that they don't have to pay us, because they'll move us down from skilled to unskilled labor.
Everything but pay.
Yeah. I've been a teacher for the last 5 years now. When I was teaching public school, it was a unionized, and it was actually the NJEA. And the EA makes the AFT looks like radicals. Like that's the sad fact of it. They're even worse than the AFT. And the sad reality is that part of it is true. Part of it is to accommodate, charter schools, and so that they can pay you lower prices. But the other reason is that teachers are criminally underpaid. Part of that's because teachers are willing to make those sacrifices for the kids, right? The other reason is that the teachers union is one of the least militant unions out there. Part of it is that individualism, right? Teachers work, their classroom is their domain, right? That's their little fiefdom that they control, and they don't really interact with other teachers the same way that a firefighter or, unfortunately, even the police, they all work together, right? So they're all stand together. Teachers don't do that. I remember when I was a steward, there's this constant fighting in the union about, because the school nurses were included within the union, and the front desk workers were in the union, and they were teachers would always complain about them, right? Oh, why are they included in the unions? And it was a constant fight to tell them, they're like, hey, these front desk employees, if they're not in the union, then they're against us, right? The front desk employees see every single piece of mail, they hear every single piece of gossip, they're a valuable asset to the union. But yet, because they're not a professional, they don't have a teaching degree or a teaching license, somehow they were, not worthy of being in the union. So that was a constant fight. And there is that definitely streak of independence and a lack of like solidarity within the teachers' unions. And unfortunately, it's extremely difficult to build that up because, again, teachers work alone and they're not spending a lot of time outside of work together. And I remember we have our meetings, our union meetings, and it would be like maybe 4 teachers out of the entire school would show up. And so that's frustrating. But currently I'm trying to get a union going in my current school, which is not unionized, but that's incredibly frustrating. And I'm seeing that firsthand. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. We will return to the presentation now. So, all right.
All right. Structure of the industrial union, the local industrial union. The basic principle of industrial unionism is, quote, one plant, one union, end quote. This means that all workers in a given shop or plant must be organized into one local union so that they may stand unitedly against their employer. Such a form of unionism provides the strongest basis for solidarity, as well as the most effective system of handling the workers' grievances. But this principle of organization has to be applied to fit the various conditions that the new unions face. Let us take some specific problems in its application. First, there is the question of small shops, where the body of workers is not large enough to maintain a separate local union of their own. In such cases, 2 or more shops should be joined together into one local union, which is a general or mixed local. But here, the tendency must be avoided of piling together a large number of shops into huge local unions. With such big, oversized locals, the grievances of workers and the businesses of the unions generally cannot be properly taken care of. In the auto and some other industries where new unions are being built, this mistake has been made in some instances, and general locals have been set up, covering many shops and including as many as 30,000 members. This is very impractical. Such general locals should not exceed 2,000 to 3,000 members. The building of enormous top-heavy locals smacks somewhat of the old AFL craft system of building up big locals from shops indiscriminately all over the city, or they may be a dash of the one big union tendency in it. In any event, this wrong practice should be avoided. Shop stewards and the plant committee. It is vital to the success of industrial unions that the system of shop stewards be fully developed. Shop stewards are the cutting edge of local unions, indeed, the foundations of the whole union in the industry. They are the beginning of unity among the workers and the starting points of collective bargaining in the industries. The stewards handle grievances, collect dues, organize union meetings, and perform many other functions in the enforcement of the union's agreements and the building of the union. The power of a given industrial union can be pretty much measured by the degree of organization possessed by its system of shop stewards. The head of the local union in a given plant is the plant committee, sometimes called the shop stewards council. The plant committee should be on broad delegate body made up of the stewards from the various departments and shops, and also of rank and file workers. The ratio of representation to the plant committee depends on the size of the plant and may range from 1 delegate to each 25 workers to 1 for each 200 or more. These delegates should be elected by the workers in their respective shops and departments. The plant committee should meet regularly and supervise all the union businesses in the plant. It should have a small executive, sometimes called the bargaining committee, to deal with the employers. When necessary to settle important questions with the company, the bargaining committee should call to its assistance general representatives of the national union or district council of the union. The local industrial council. The various local unions of an industrial union in a given city or local community have many problems which they must deal with in the common, and therefore they should be united together in a local industrial council of their own industry. Thus, the many local unions in the big Chicago stockyards should be formed into one packing house workers' council. For the same general reasons, the numerous unions in the steel mills in Pittsburgh should be combined into one inclusive steel workers' councils, and likewise, the various unions of the auto plants of Detroit should be formed into one auto workers' council, and so on in all communities where there are several local unions in any given industry. Such local industrial councils, which may be named variously in different unions, should consist of broad representation from the local unions that form their base, and they should avoid the system of being merely narrow committees of business agents and other bureaucratic officials that characterize their corresponding local craft union councils of carpenters, machinists, etc., of the AFL. The new local industrial councils should hold periodic broad conferences of rank and file representatives of their constituent local unions. Constituent local unions. They should be active organizing agents in their industry locally and should generally stimulate growth and functioning of their constituent local unions. The district and industrial council. The local industrial unions and local industrial councils of a given national industrial union should also form councils of a district or regional character in order to deal with the many problems that arise in these larger areas, problems of organization, support of strikes, and many other matters. The district industrial council, named as they may be in several unions, should be based on natural industrial divisions such as, for example, a broad minefield, a big steel district containing many mill towns, an extensive textile area, a railroad system, etc. Or they may correspond to political divisions, as for example, a state building trades council, etc. As in the case of the local industrial councils, these districts or regional industrial councils should be built on a rank and file representation, instead of upon the narrow AFL system of little cliques of officials for the corresponding types of organization. They should also hold broad periodic conferences of rank and file delegates.
Thank you, Comrade Andrea. With that, we'll break for another discussion round. If you go deeper into the pamphlet, he will then talk about national organization, national conferences, and so forth. And all of these throughout them are rank and file workers that are elected to these bodies and are answerable to the people that are below them. And if you kind of look at the overall similar structure, you see a lot of similarities with the councils of Soviets and also with how the trade unions in the USSR were organized. I thought it was rather interesting, and I do recommend you pick up the pamphlet from New Outlook Publishers and read it over. It's quite fascinating, and I think there are many lessons for organizing today. Any questions or comments about that section? Comrade Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah, does anybody know if general union membership is up or down relative to, let's say, the 2000s? Thank you.
Comrade Angelo, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, I'll try to.
There you go.
Well, it's my understanding that the union membership in unions is going down every 2 or 3 years. But recently, it started to go up. Small things like Starbucks and things like that are now, unionization seems to be the thing among a lot of young workers. They're interested in the union. That's the only thing I can give you, unless anybody has another answer for that. But I have a question. As we're going through this document, I'm noticing the similarities between how this operates, the structure, and the structure of a Bolshevik party. I see a lot of similarities. Districts, locals, the same as a cell in the party. District, we have districts in the party. I noticed a lot of similarities. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Angelo. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, year after year, union membership is on the decline, and even with all these reinvigorated unionization efforts, that has continued. Unfortunately, all these campaigns that have gone on are for the most part small campaigns. So therefore, it really barely makes a dent in the overall union density. And when you couple that with the union busting that's gone on between mechanization, modernization, and offshoring factories, and just flat out unions being broken, union membership has not maintained pace. But what we have seen is support for unions is increasing. But as of now, and a lot of this is because of, the business unionist leaders of the AFL-CIO, inability to, or unwillingness to back these campaigns and properly fund them and help them with the resources they need. A lot of these campaigns ultimately fail. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody in the Starbucks Workers United campaign who soon will become a staff member of the campaign. But what they mentioned to me is that, ever since, the 60s, there's been a huge decline in the membership of the union movement overall. And it's been steadily, and now we're just below 10% membership in the United States, both public and private. There's been only until very recently an actual uptick in union membership. So I'm talking maybe 6 months ago that started, possibly, around that time frame. So we're at the cusp of a new political climate in the US that trade unions could use to their advantage. I mean, I'm hearing people in the Starbucks campaign from, people from all sorts of different, tendencies, political ideologies, and they're all talking about, hey, what's up with Sean O'Brien and that whole Trump's tariffs thing? What's up with the other Sean? Why did both of them have those views? There's more of an increased, I want to say, political consciousness amongst people in general, and there's more of a gear towards skepticism of business unionism amongst both staff, the bureaucracy of the unions, and the rank and file. That I find to be good ground to organize within. 'Tis all.
Thank you, Comrade.
Yeah, this might be a dumb question. Probably like 5 years ago, one of my coworkers came to me and he had this brilliant idea that he wanted to unionize just the scrub techs in where I work in the cath lab, which would be about 17 people. And I said, I'll be happy to help you unionize, but it's a big deal. Go home, read this book. And if you still think we can do it, then I'll help you do it. But my bigger question in that is should you always organize, if you can't do a broad-based unionization effort, should you shoot for a 20-person union if that's all you can get? Or should you really focus on broadening it? Because that was my argument. I said, really, if you want to have the strongest union you could possibly have for the hospital, you wouldn't organize just this certain group of people. You would organize the janitors and you would organize the transport people and the nurses all together. So is there ever any benefit to organizing very small?
Comrade, did you want to respond?
Short answer, no. Unless, of course, the workplace is only 20 people. But when I'll give a perfect example of this: the drive at Bessemer, Alabama, the Amazon warehouse. They only were looking to organize certain titles within the warehouse. What Amazon did in challenging the petition, they said no, the whole building is the bargaining unit, and because they only organized the specific titles they were organizing, that's the main reason they lost that election. Because Amazon filed the petition, challenged the position with the NLRB, and then the NLRB made the whole workplace the bargaining unit. If you're in a workplace with multiple units, you need to maximize as many units within that workplace as possible. Because according to U.S. labor law, the company, the boss, they can go back and say no, and they can widen the bargaining unit, which will essentially force a lost vote.
Thank you, Comrade. For time, we do need to move on, though, so...
Organizational practice of industrial unionism. Discipline. A firm discipline is a basic essential for the success of industrial unionism, as of labor unionism in general. Good organization and discipline give the workers greater confidence in themselves and in each other, and hence increase their fighting capacity. Well-drilled soldiers are far better fighters than loosely organized, poorly trained recruits, and the same principle applies to labor unions. The industrial unions will do well, therefore, in the shaping of their activities to keep in mind the necessity for creating a good discipline among their membership. With ruthless American capitalism to fight, such a discipline will stand them in good stead, and indeed is a life and death question for them. Democracy. To build up this necessary discipline, the prime essential is that the industrial unions conduct their affairs in a democratic manner. Trade unionists are not enlisted men, and they cannot be disciplined by mere arbitrary command of their leaders. Their discipline must be essentially self-imposed, and such voluntary union discipline can exist in maximum degree only if the workers feel that they are controlling the union's activities by democratic action. The AFL craft union leaders have always grossly violated the principles of trade union democracy. The result is that nearly all AFL unions are dominated by bureaucrats and dictators who, to enforce their arbitrary will and conservative policies upon the membership, have not hesitated often to use sluggers, stealing of elections, packing of conventions, and other ruthless methods of coercing the rank and file. This something of democracy has also given birth to racketeering and has lowered the tone and effectiveness of the whole labor movement.
This violation.
Okay, thank you. Education. A good labor discipline. I'm sorry, it got blurry again. Oh, here, I have it pulled up. Hold on. A good labor discipline necessitates, as we have seen, a thoroughgoing trade union democracy, and such a democracy, in turn, requires an educated rank and file. Discipline, democracy, and education go hand in hand in the building of effective labor unionism, and the new expanding industrial unions should write this elementary truth plainly in all their constitutions and ways of doing business. They must begin earnestly the education of their members and also of the broad masses generally. The CIO needle trades unions have done much valuable work in this vital field, but even this is only a start. Every stage of the labor movement, from the local union to the National Labor Federation, should have a well-organized, actively functioning educational department working on a mass scale. In this manner, real progress can be made in offsetting the paralyzing effects of the vast stream of propaganda, poison that the capitalists are pouring into the workers' minds through press, pulpit, radio, movies, etc. The industrial unions will reap rich dividends from such educational work in the shape of better working and living conditions for their members and a bigger and stronger organization in every respect. Labor union journals. The most important single educational task confronting the industrial unions is to build up a broad and effective labor press. One of the most disastrous weaknesses of the AFL unions has always been their miserable papers and magazines. The journals of the international unions are, with few exceptions, dry, uninteresting, saturated with insidious employer propaganda, and closed to progressive thought. The local trade union papers, both official and unofficial, are even worse. Many of them are simply parasitic blackmail sheets, corrupt and rotten to the core. Often they shamelessly take money from employers to fight everything progressive in the labor movement. They sell their columns and labor's endorsements to any political faker who wants them. Every important city has one or more such contemptible rags, and the low tone for all this degraded system of labor journalism is set by the American Federationist, the national organ of the AFL. The columns of this magazine are packed with reactionary propaganda, advertisements of union smashing open shop companies, red baiting, misrepresentations of industrial unionism, lying attacks upon the Soviet Union, etc. Trade union unity and the People's Front. The CIO has made its splendid progress in organizing the workers in the mass production industries because it has learned important lessons from past experience in these industries and has applied these lessons in its ongoing work and strikes. Now, in order to consolidate these gains, to establish the new industrial unions on a solid basis, and to make further progress, it is necessary that the structure and organizational practice of these organizations be developed on sound principles. The new unions must not carry over the reactionary systems of the craft unions. They must develop organizational forms and methods corresponding to their own tasks and social outlook. The foregoing pages indicate the main lines along which this should be done. The proposals in this pamphlet are addressed chiefly to the industrial unions, but obviously they also apply in large measure to the craft unions. The progressive members of these unions should work inside them to rebuild them as much as possible along the lines of democratizing them, federating them together, and developing united action among them, looking toward their eventual amalgamation into industrial unionism led by progressive officials. In these pages, much sharp criticism has been made of the craft unions, but this has been directed against the reactionary top bureaucrats who control them. The Greens, Vivols, Whartons, Frays, Hutchisons, Ryans, etc. We must never forget the mass of members comprising the craft unions and also the bulk of lower officialdom are honest and sincere workers striving earnestly to set up the best possible system of unionism. They are quite responsive to industrial union arguments. Trade union unity has now become a most urgent necessity, not only in order that the workers may advance as rapidly as possible, but also so that labor can defend itself from the swiftly gathering forces of reaction and incipient fascism. Every employer is encouraged to attack the workers because the labor movement is split. The rise of the dangerous vigilante movement, the ferocious opposition to President Roosevelt's Supreme Court bill, or the presidency of Donald Trump today, the violence used against labor in many strikes, the flood of reactionary bills introduced into Congress and in various state legislatures. The desperate efforts to turn the farmers and middle class against labor are all threatening signs which the workers, on pain of disaster, must pay attention to. In the face of such a situation, for the AFL to go ahead with its war upon the CIO is a crime against the working class. The split trade union movement must be unified. And this unity must go still further, beyond the ranks of the working class. A great people's front is necessary. The trade unions should join hands with the farmers, the small business people, and the white-collar elements, and set afoot a movement that will lead to the establishment of a broad national farmer labor party. The farmers and lower middle class must not be surrendered to the Liberty League reactionaries. Only by such a broad people's front can the growing reaction and fascist movement be checked, the democratic rights of the people be preserved and extended, and the masses be started along the way to a new and better prosperity. Stormy days are ahead for the toiling masses everywhere, and unity in our ranks is a life and death question. The world capitalist system, including that of the United States, is fast breaking down. The present economic prosperity is only temporary. It is largely based on the armament, munitions industry, and it will soon be followed by a deep industrial crisis that will far exceed in devastating effects the crash of 1929. Fascism is on the rampage all over the capitalist world, and a devastating or a frightful murderous war threatens daily to engulf all humanity in a new and far more terrible bloodbath than that of 1914, excuse me. Already the fascist murderers have drenched Spain and China in blood, and they are ready to plunge the whole world into even more deadly war. All this shows clearly that the capitalist system is in decay. It has become a murderous break upon civilization. It must be abolished and socialism established. Socialism by wiping out the capitalist ownership of industry and exploitation of the toiling masses that are the modern cause of poverty, war, fascism, and innumerable other social disasters will launch a new era of happiness and progress in the world. The Russian workers and peasants, with their great Communist Party at their head, have dealt the first smashing blow against the capitalist system. They are the trailblazers of socialism. The workers and the other exploited masses of the whole world will, sooner than we realize, follow their glorious example.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll break for our final discussion round. If you have a question or a comment, please use the raise hand function and we'll get to you. I just wanted to say this was written back in the 1930s, but it is still very amazing how apropos it is to today.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between then and today. One difference, much of the labor press has been destroyed. Very few unions still have labor press. I can give an example from my union. When I first started, we still had a monthly magazine that was put out by the International, which they still print supposedly, but nobody ever gets it now. The local had a bulletin that they put out monthly, then it was quarterly. Now they don't put it out there. Very little information makes it back to the rank and file. Even without, we've been without a contract for almost 2 years now, and they're being very hush hush with the contract negotiations. And like, I look back to a couple of years ago, and I see, the UAW giving public updates that anybody could see on the contract negotiations as they go on.
60 seconds.
And it's frustrating. But this is common within the labor movement. There's really not much left by way of the labor press. Well, I'll give a positive note of the labor press. The United Electrical Radio Machine Workers Unions. If anybody has a chance, go look at their website. They have what is called the UE Steward. It's put out semi-monthly. It comes out usually up to 8 times a year. We try to get the new issues out when they come out onto Labor Today. And it's a great publication and if that's an example of a real industrial rank and file led union along the line being burned about tonight, and we're still operate in that manner. And just one last, the best at this point, the labor press that's left. I recommend, and if anybody here hasn't read it, please get on it. Partner organization Lowell puts out Labor Today. It's updated almost daily. And we kind of have a print edition a couple of times a year. But check that out. There's a lot going on, and we aim to be a lot more informative and give a class-based analysis on what's going on within the labor
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so a while back I was reading about um, the history of the Railway Labor Act and also the La Follette movement, and I saw during World War One the five major railroad brotherhoods. They were in a very positive upswing. They were on the offensive against capital. They and after the war, they kept it going for a while. I think it was 1922 that for they just kind of I shouldn't say the unions gave up, but the leadership gave up. They were on the path to first unionizing all of the different workers, but also they were trying to amalgamate into an industrial railway union. This was going to go into carry on into an independent Labor Party,
60
which
seconds.
being led by the La Follette movement. But then the reactionary leaders, out of nowhere, well, I shouldn't say out of nowhere, they were scared. They actually worked with the capitalists to break up any amalgamations that had occurred during World War One. So, a lot of progress was lost after 1922, but just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Comrade. With that, we will go to our wrap up. Thank you all. This has been a pretty good class. So once again, just let everyone know we have recovered our old YouTube account that we've lost to records and uploaded all our old classes and videos. Please like, subscribe, and check out what subjects we had covered prior. Cell chairs need to be calling their cell members to remind them of attendance. The next issue of New Masses 2025 has begun production. If you have any art or poetry, prose, or other cultural product that you would like us to feature, please email it to info@partyofcommunistusa.net. Also had mentioned the Labor Today print edition. Those will be going out to PCUSA members, and if you go to luell.us and labortoday.luell.us, you can also get a print edition to send to your house. We are in need of volunteers for the People's School. A few roles we need filling are people to assist with managing social media and podcast platforms, as well as video editors, audio editors, graphic designers, artists, narrators, as well as facilitators, web controllers, and moderators. Please email info@peopleschool.us if you are interested and attend our next staff meeting if possible. Another way to support the school is through our online store and propaganda. All purchases do go to support the school and the education we provide 51 weeks a year. View from Left Field is our new podcast on progressive news from a progressive perspective. The old YouTube is now the View from Left Field podcast. Please like the YouTube videos and subscribe with 5-star ratings on your favorite podcast platforms. New Outlook Publishers is our sister publishing house. For an update on that, I will turn the floor over to Comrade.
Yes, please visit our partner publishing house, New Outlook Publishers. You'll find a lot of great works there. And specific for this class, 2 works that were put out through Labor United Educational League, or LUL, through New Outlook Publishers. The work we read tonight, Industrial Unionism, as well as Organizing Methods in the Steel Industry. And these are very important works from Comrade Foster, and I recommend everybody check them out. They're very important for any type of organizing today. And our newest release, as part of our work with the Jones Foster Party School of the PCUSA, we put out Philosophy and Revolution, so check that out. And once again, please build your Marxist-Leninist libraries. Once again, you can find these works at New Outlook Publishers.
Thank you, Comrade. The Harry Bridges School of Labor is put on by Labor United Education League as the labor school. Classes are held twice a month and cover a variety of topics aiming at building class consciousness among union members. For May, we will be doing a showing of Mate One. This will be a movie showing, and it will be split into part 1 on May 7th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and part 2 on Saturday, May 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern for Pacific. And with that, we'll close out with the International.
We want condescending saviors to rule us from a judgment hall. We workers ask not for their fame.